And the Oscar goes to...
You know, something I've always been interested in doing is ranking the Best Picture nominees of a given year. I'm definitely more passionate about animation, but I do enjoy talking about live-action movies that I like, and what better excuse to do that than to rank the contenders for the biggest award in the industry. The problem is, if you talk about one Best Picture nominee, you gotta talk about all of them, and I never have the motivation to do that. Usually, somewhere in the lineup there's a lame pick that I don't want to watch, or an absolute abomination that didn't deserve to see the light of day. Yeah, obviously not every Best Picture nominee is going to be created equal and there's always got to be a villain, but it puts me off from dedicating the time into watching and ranking all of these. I mean, I've got better things to do. But this year, something bizarre happened. After reacting to the Oscar nominations with some friends, I looked at the list of Best Picture nominees and noticed that there was no pick that was standing in my way. I honestly couldn't believe it. I thought they were gonna nominate Avatar 3, which would be unbelievably lame. Am I right, fellas? But no, they said no to Avatar, which is not only really funny, but combined with how there's no horrific atrocity in this lineup, also means that there's no movie here that I don't have the motivation to talk about. I had already seen and enjoyed 6 of these before the nominations were announced, and the other 4 didn't seem like too much of a chore to get through. So hey, this is the perfect opportunity for me to finally rank some Best Picture nominees. And I mean the perfect one, because next year they'll probably nominate something stupid that will discourage me from doing this ranking again. So honestly, I couldn't have picked a better selection, especially when it comes to the quality of said selection. From what I've seen, this is one of, if not the single best lineup of 10 nominees this category has ever had. Not a single bad film to be found anywhere. Are there some strange picks that I would have swapped out? Yeah, of course, that's kind of a given. There definitely were some better options I would have preferred to see in here, but considering the standards of the Academy, who usually sneak in a piece of Oscar bait dog shit or two, I'm perfectly happy with this lineup. Not only is the weakest film here still a solid movie, but it feels like there's a great variety of nominations this year across many genres with something for everybody to enjoy. I had a great time watching through these and seeing a bunch of talented filmmakers display their magic. So this seems like a fun idea. Not only do I get to talk about more live action cinema on the channel and do a ranking where I don't want to die, but hopefully I can provide a fresh perspective on a lot of these movies. I'm more of an outsider to this category since this is the first time I'm watching all the nominees in a given year, and I like to consider myself a relatively unbiased individual compared to all the hateful, annoying, pretentious film snobs that populate the internet. So I think the thoughts of someone who's more well-versed in animation than live action could be interesting and have takes that are not unbearably snobbish. There will be disagreements between us with my ranking, obviously. I think that will become apparent very quickly. But I want to keep the ranking as fair as possible and rank the movies based on how much I personally enjoyed them, rather than based on how much quote-unquote Oscar merit they have. This is purely a list based on my quirky little opinions. Although, as a treat, I brought in some special guest stars who are also going to share their thoughts on the movies, providing even more perspectives on these films and what they bring to the table. Since this is a ranking with no bad movies, I want this to be more about celebrating the films rather than just telling you which ones I like more than the others. So sit back and enjoy as I rank all 10 of 2026's Academy Award for Best Picture nominees, starting with...
Be a winner at the game of life.
F1. Easily the odd one out when it comes to this year's nominees. The baffling pick that nobody is really on board with. And like, yeah, I get why. But despite its bizarre inclusion, I actually liked F1 quite a bit. So much so that I almost didn't want to rank it at the bottom. So I didn't. Yes, F1 is not last place. And no, it's not Frankenstein either. While it may not be what you expect, the bottom spot on this list was an easy given for me. Out of all 10 movies, The Secret Agent is far and away the one I feel the least emotion towards. It's a fine enough movie, but nothing really that special in the grand scheme of things. And really, it's the only film in this lineup that I don't feel entirely confident in saying that I like. Which doesn't mean that I dislike it, it's just that all the other movies hooked me significantly more than this one. But in such a stellar selection, even the weakest movie has quite a bit to enjoy, such as the way it looks. I really dig how they captured the Brazilian setting, and their use of color especially. Even just the outfits of the characters, or the colors of the walls in the background and whatnot, they really make the film stick out and look super visually appealing compared to many other modern Oscar contenders. It's probably one of the best movies on the list in that regard. I also do enjoy the vibes and atmosphere for the most part, with many scenes feeling very laid back and doing a great job immersing you into this world. It's nice to be around these people and their interactions feel really genuine. It's definitely a very human movie, which I always appreciate in a film like this. Topped off with some nice music that complements the setting wonderfully, barring this god-awful track in the credits that sounds like it came from Yoshi's New Island. and you have yourself a film that is just enjoyable enough for me to say that I had an okay time whilst watching. But not much more, I'm afraid. Really, this movie has one major flaw, and that's the runtime. Good lord, this movie did not need to be 161 minutes. I'll say right now that I have nothing against long movies, even if I tend to gravitate towards shorter ones. But I don't brush a movie off for having a long runtime, which you'll see later in this list as I loved other movies that hovered around a similar length. But the thing is, to make a long-ass movie work, you either have to have super compelling characters or a significant amount of stuff going on to keep things consistently interesting. And I'm sorry to say, but The Secret Agent doesn't really deliver on either end. While I enjoy the vibes, those mainly come down to the setting. The characters themselves, while still likable, just don't offer me much in terms of investment. The main guy, Armando, feels so shrouded in mystery that it's hard for me to get myself to care about him or his relationships with those around him. Maybe if we had more time to look into his past and get a feel for this character and what he's all about, I'd be more emotionally attached to him throughout the long runtime. Wait a minute, what am I saying? They have plenty of goddamn time. They're just not using it effectively. Every scene in this movie feels too long, and I'm talking like twice the length they should have been. And a lot of these scenes feel like they lack a real point, or by the time they get to the point, the scene still has 5 minutes left to go. Like the opening at the gas stop. This does a fine enough job in setting the mood of the film, but it goes on for 10 minutes, and there's just not enough interesting happening here. Like I said, I don't mind long movies or scenes, but they gotta have more substance in them to keep me engaged. This movie feels like it meanders around for most of the runtime, introducing plot threads and characters that just don't add too much. Sometimes Armando can disappear for like 15 minutes at a time, and we're stuck focusing on someone far less interesting than the main character who already felt like he was lacking something. Whereas in a movie like One Battle After Another, all the plot threads complement each other to make a full experience and are equally interesting, so it doesn't matter who we're focusing on. Plus, tensions are kept consistently high throughout the picture, making the long runtime not really feel that way. By the time tensions start to rise in The Secret Agent, I will say it does start to pick up. The last act of this movie is where things start coming together, and it's actually able to capture my interest. But at that point, 2 hours of movie have already happened, and it's kinda too late, I'm afraid. There are other things in this movie I didn't fully vibe with, such as this awkward framing device that I wish was used in a more interesting way, or how none of the side characters really get time to shine despite hints of being interesting, but I think you get the gist. This movie has great visuals, likable enough characters, good music, and some stellar performances, which makes it perfectly watchable, but that's just not enough. There needs to be more to your movie to warrant this long runtime, and what is here wasn't developed to its fullest potential. I must stress that this really isn't a bad movie, and I'm happy to see it nominated since it's always nice to see foreign films make the cut, even if there is a much better foreign film also nominated for Best Picture. It definitely has its merits, and I can see why it would rank higher for others, but compared to the much more exciting, compelling, and emotional nominees this year, I don't see much of a reason to ever go back to this one.
Hello everybody, it's me, James of TJS, here today to talk about The Secret Agent. The Secret Agent is a 2025 Brazilian political thriller, written and directed by Kleber Mond. I can't. Upon release, it was met with widespread critical acclaim, which I guess was kind of expected for a movie nominated for Best Picture. But what does a random high schooler who pays for Letterboxd think of it? That's what I'm here for. I really enjoyed The Secret Agent for the most part. I found it to be such a vibe with such a lived-in world. It's filled to the brim with secrets, details, and subtle moments. The whole film is like a puzzle that you actually want to solve. I found the plot to be a little muddled throughout, but I think the final half hour really helped clear up a lot of qualms I have with the story. I think the reveal that this whole thing was viewed through the lens of a student in modern day, researching the events, was a really interesting parallel to how we the audience feel. Just like her, we're thrown into a period before our time and just have to pick up the pieces of what little we're given. To me, that's a really great use of subtle storytelling. Unfortunately though, I don't really think I understood a lot of what this film was trying to say beyond surface level, both because I wasn't alive in the time period it represents, and because I have a limited knowledge of Brazilian culture, especially during its dictatorship. What I've gathered through others is that the student in modern day not knowing much of what happened is a reflection of how Brazil kind of moved on from their own murky past instead of confronting it. Which, if that was the intention, I think that's a beautiful message to lead a film on. One last thing, yeah, it's too long. Not absurdly so, but, I mean, for a 160-minute film, it really wears its length on its sleeve. If they had cut it down to like 135, I think a lot of the meandering second act could have been smoothed over. But as it stands, it's a great and incredibly thought-provoking film that I'm really glad I was able to experience. I couldn't get into everything as this movie is very long and very dense and I'm kinda short on time. But overall, I'll be rating The Secret Agent a 7.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for having me. Back to you.
Oh, quit crying. You got plenty more to spare, lady.
Keep in mind that from this point forward, I do like all the movies on this list. I feel like I need to re-emphasize that for the people in the back because this is YouTube where people accuse you of hating something even if you say you like it. So with that said, number 9 is Hamnet. Okay, let me explain. I like Hamnet, I really do. In fact, I grew to appreciate it more after watching it a second time. I think me 3 to 4 years ago would have brushed it aside and called it mid, but now that I've matured a bit, I can definitely respect what this movie is going for and get some, well, I don't know if enjoyment is the right word to use for a film like this, but you get what I'm saying. But to me, this is one of the less impressive nominees in this batch, which isn't saying much because this is a stellar selection, and there is some great stuff in here. For one, Jessie Buckley is absolutely phenomenal. She just disappears into this role and conveys every emotion near flawlessly. This is the kind of movie where the lead role is a very make it or break it factor, and this definitely makes it. She more than earned this nomination and eventual win, let's be real. That's not to discredit the rest of the cast either, they're all great as well. And they do a great job of bringing this really compelling story to life, from the relationship between William and Agnes, to Agnes' struggle after losing Hamnet, to the way that contrasts with how William grapples with the same loss. It's all handled very well, and because of these great performances, it really lets you sink into the story and get invested in these characters. You can really tell they had a ton of admiration for the story, and I think they adapted it to the screen in a way that makes sense and makes for a compelling watch. This is in addition to, of course, excellent music and production design. I don't know about better than Sinners and Frankenstein, but still really strong. I think this is a good movie with a compelling story to tell that it executes in a very respectable way. But I'd be lying if I said I completely vibed with all of it. This is definitely more of a me problem rather than the movie itself doing anything inherently wrong, but this movie didn't really fully engage me from beginning to end like I would have wanted it to. I definitely wouldn't call it boring because that sounds a bit harsh, and the movie still had enough to hold my attention. But I don't know, while it definitely has more to it than The Secret Agent, it still feels like something is missing. I guess I can't criticize it too much because that would be criticizing the novel this was based on, but I feel like there was a way to make this story a bit more compelling. I'm just gonna be upfront, I don't really gel with Chloe Zhao's direction here. No, I'm not gonna call her a fraud because she made a mediocre Marvel movie, or act like I'm above her because I'm a pretentious snob. It's not like she did a bad job or anything, and there are moments where I think her direction really shines and shows that she was indeed a good fit to tell this story. But for most of the movie, the way she presents things just fails to captivate me. A lot of this movie is pretty slow and uneventful, and it's not like I hate slow and uneventful movies, but there's just not enough here to keep me fully engrossed by the story, nor justify a 2-hour runtime. Gonna be honest, I think at least 15 to 20 minutes of this movie could have been shaved off. They got all the important story beats in, but there's a lot of fat here that's used to emphasize emotion, but just ends up dragging the movie down more than anything. Like when the twins are born, that's a good scene that conveys all the emotions it needs to, but they drag it out for 7 minutes and it just kinda loses me by the end. I think 4 to 5 minutes would have gotten the job done just fine. Then when Hamnet dies, it's beyond devastating, and once again, Jessie Buckley is doing a fantastic job. But then we have to have another scene conveying how she's sad, and then Judith comes in and she is sad, and then William comes in and is also sad, and it's like, get on with it, Donkey Kong, we ain't got all day. I swear I'm not a heartless monster. This is a genuinely sad scene, but it just drags on for too long. A lot of scenes are like that, unfortunately, taking what are initially really compelling developments and milking them to the point where any emotion just sort of fades away and you just want to see the story move forward. Maybe I could forgive this a little if the movie was visually interesting, but unfortunately it kinda isn't. A lot of scenes look very drab and boring, with an overflow of browns and grays, and some pretty dull lighting, like it's almost hard to see what's happening in some of these scenes. There's rarely any kind of interesting shot or use of composition, making a lot of this movie feel kind of standard. The story is well told and compelling, but there's just no standout moments or scene where I go, damn, which is frankly disappointing. At least that is the case until the ending. I think these last 20 minutes are where everything really comes together and is the part of the movie that proves to me that Zhao was indeed a good fit for the story. Watching the play alongside Agnes and seeing her go from frustrated by to wrapped up in the way William has adapted their son's death into his art is almost magical. And then her and the audience reaching out as Agnes finally lets go, it's a really powerful wonderful moment. This is what makes the entire film worth it, and the slow pace of the movie actually works in its favor here. Unfortunately though, said pacing kinda holds the rest of the movie back for me. But not by too much. I still think this is a good, well-made movie that is definitely worthy of the nominations and praise it's been given. It's not some insulting piece of trash or a movie I just don't get. I get Hamnet, I really do, and while I may not love it as much as others, I can respect what they were going for here. But when push comes to shove, yeah, this is definitely not one of my favorites. Nothing about it really blew me away in the same way that at least one aspect of the 8 films I ranked above it did. Still though, good movie, and if you think my review was too mean, just remember, it could have been a lot worse.
I went into Hamnet expecting it to be an incredibly well-made film, which I would personally find quite stuffy and without that much that I could personally connect to. And for most of the movie, it was that. I thought that the film was incredibly well made, but its emotions and themes of grief didn't quite hit me all that much. And then the ending happened. Hamnet is a brilliant example of a slow burn film where it's hard to really judge it until the credits roll, as the emotions work well thanks to the overall experience rather than through any individual moment. The emotions of the whole piece were carried by gorgeous cinematography and phenomenal acting throughout, and on that topic, Jessie Buckley deserves Best Actress, Paul Mescal was fantastic at humanizing Bill Shakespeare, and even the kid actors were all incredible. Yet despite these quality elements, some of the themes of grief did admittedly feel a bit standard for me. Until we got to the ending Hamlet performance, where we get to see how much this work of art truly helped both Agnes and William to cope with their grief. William channeled his emotions into his work, and Agnes was able to properly process everything thanks to the impact of it. And my goodness, these final 20 minutes which showed off all of this just floored me, and that ending shot with Agnes seeing Hamlet again, yeah, that was the part which finally broke me. I obviously find stories about loss and grief very moving, but some of my favourite stories are all about art and our relation with it, and I think that Hamnet is an exceptional example of this kind of story, as we can clearly see the impact that this play has had on both the audience and the creator. That's the true beauty of this film for me, and that's why I ultimately love it so much. And, as a bonus, it was also filmed around the area of the UK where I live, so I've naturally got a bit of extra bias towards this movie on top of all this other great stuff. So yeah, if you're a Hamnet fan who got annoyed at Emoji's placement, I hope that my segment has somewhat made up for it.
Okay, and now it's time for F1. Before it was nominated, I never saw this one, despite being a huge fan of the director's previous film, Top Gun Maverick. And I'm gonna be honest, I was fully expecting it to take last place. And I mean, can you really blame me? This is pretty unanimously the pick to clown on, in this season's quote-unquote Oscar villain. Which I mean, if this is the villain we're working with, it must have been a pretty strong year. Especially considering that last year, the Oscar villain was quite literally a hate crime in movie form. Now, I'm not gonna defend this movie being in this slot, and despite its placement on this list, it's definitely the movie that warrants being here the least. I didn't see no other choice, but I'm guessing it was more worthy of a nomination. I did see it was just an accident, which I really liked and would have much preferred to be given some love. So yeah, this is kinda dumb, and feels like the only reason it made it in is because it's the successor to Top Gun Maverick. But, like I said in the intro, I want to be as fair as possible in my judgments of these, since the last thing I want is to be an unbearable snob. And it's not fair to let awards talk change your general thoughts on a movie. Is Raya and the Last Dragon worthy of its Academy Award for Best Animated Feature nomination? No. But is Raya and the Last Dragon still a good movie? Also, no, where was I going with this? The point is, I want to judge these movies based on how I truly feel about them, and to be frank, I did enjoy F1 a fair amount. It is a pretty typical sports movie that hits all the beats you would expect. Even for this director, it feels like he's treading a lot of similar ground, with certain character dynamics and scenes feeling analogous to ones from Top Gun Maverick. But the thing is, Top Gun Maverick is a damn good movie with amazing direction. So this guy taking his skills and putting them into a standard racing movie isn't such a bad thing. The direction here definitely isn't as strong as Maverick, but the race scenes are still really cool, and they do a great job capturing that exhilarating feeling. Surprisingly, it feels effective even when you're watching this on something that isn't a movie theater screen like I did. And that's owed to just how snappy and fast-paced everything feels, perfect for a racing movie. In addition, I also like the relationship between Sonny and Joshua, going from hot-headed rivals to more understanding teammates, with a lot of natural ups and downs along the way. I mean, obviously the same sort of relationship was done better in Top Gun Maverick, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work here as well. It feels pretty natural and adds some extra spice to the already really really engaging racing scenes. The score and sound of these scenes is top level stuff. I at the very least don't think you can argue against this nomination. And because of this engaging relationship and the strong direction, I was engaged throughout most of the, admittedly, still too long runtime. The movie definitely isn't perfect or anything. Like I said, it treads a lot of similar ground to a better movie and feels like it's living in its shadows since the characters in F1 are far less compelling. I wish we learned more about the backstories of both the main characters because what we do get just feels a bit surface level and basic. I don't really care about Sonny's relationship with this lady or anybody else really besides Joshua. And yeah, that runtime is definitely a bit much. I was never bored during this movie, I just feel they could have trimmed a lot of it out during the editing stage. Are you noticing a pattern yet? And because of that, the story begins to feel like it's falling into a repetitive structure the longer it goes on. High point for the team, low point for the team, then crash. High point for the team, low point for the team, then crash. And since this is the most basic story ever, it deflates a lot of the tension in the final race since you already know they're going to win, which is a shame given how well done it is otherwise. Yeah, outside of the racing scenes, there's not much here that's going to blow you away. It's not like this movie ever becomes super deep or complex or anything and hits you with life-changing themes and ideas. Hamnet is the movie with a superior story that has far more to say and truly awards-worthy performances, which is more that I can say about F1. But in terms of personal enjoyment, I feel I got more out of this one, if only by a bit. And that's saying something considering I also liked Hamnet. It's really just a preference thing. Does it deserve this nomination over all the other options they could have put here? No, I'm definitely not arguing that. But on its own, just as a popcorn flick, yeah, this is a solid film. It was well done, I enjoyed it, and didn't feel like it wasted my time. Will I be hunted down for not ranking this in last place? Yeah, probably. But hey, it's my list and I can do what I want, so shut up. F1 is a pretty good movie, even if it's not Best Picture nominee material. Though maybe it would be if it had John Cleese Frog. Every movie should have John Cleese Frog.
F1 is a weird choice to nominate for Best Picture. Of all 10 of the movies that were nominated, this is the one film everyone can agree is this year's Oscar villain. And I can see why. The plot is very basic and predictable. We're watching an arrogant racer growing to become a selfless legend throughout the course of the film. It's pretty much a self-insert fanfic for Brad Pitt, and he's fine in this. He's doing a solid job in his performance, but for the most part, I just see and hear Brad Pitt. There's also a Lewis Hamilton cameo at the end of the film, and he was never in the previous races before, which really confused me. This movie is basically Cars, but the racers are humans. It feels stupid to say that since the Cars movies and Turbo are the only other racing movies I've seen. I still think F1 is a pretty good movie. Although it has a standard plot and fine performances, those are nothing compared to the other aspects. From a technical standpoint, this movie is phenomenal. The editing is incredibly slick, the sound design is super fitting, the cinematography is striking, and the visual effects absolutely blew me away. It's supposed to make you feel that these are actual F1 cars that Brad Pitt and Damson Idris are racing in, and the effects team nailed it! My favorite scene in the movie is undoubtedly Joshua Pierce's big crash. He's pushing too hard to go in front of Verstappen, and because of the rain, he slips into a curb and is sent absolutely flying. Hearing the faint cries from the commentator as everything but the score is silenced really breaks my heart. This is supposed to reflect on the horror people would see when someone crashes their race car, and said car bursts into flames. When my family and I saw this, we were all dead silent. What a good scene. Overall, F1 is very good. I really hope it doesn't win Best Picture though. I don't think it has a chance of winning any of its nominations. Okay, maybe it has a small chance for Best Sound, but that's it. I officially declare this meme
Approved!
Wait for it. Aliens.
Oh, snap.
Ever since my sister and I saw Poor Things 2 years ago, we've both been big Yorgos Lanthimos heads. It's bizarre to me that he's a filmmaker we're mutually interested in, considering how, unconventional his films can be. But yeah, I really dig this man's messed up imagination and the crazy situations he puts Emma Stone into. I thought Poor Things was really great, and I'm disappointed I never got to talk about it on this channel. Kinds of Kindness was a fun time as well. And now he's 3 for 3 in terms of what I've seen from him, since Bugonia is definitely another winner. This is a really well done and immensely engaging movie, which kind of took me by surprise. While I admire the weirdness of Lanthimos' other works, based on the trailer and plot synopsis for this one, I wasn't really sure if I'd vibe with it. I feel like there's a very fine line between weird and dumb, and I was concerned as to if this movie would fall into the latter category. But the trick is, Bugonia is a deceptively quote-unquote normal film. When Michelle gets kidnapped, it seems like Teddy and Don are the crazy ones who are fueled by conspiracy theories. And the movie doesn't completely deny that through the way they act. So with this in mind, the audience would obviously be rooting for Michelle and her escape. And it seems like this would make the first 2/3 of the movie miserable to watch, as most of it is just Emma Stone being tortured. You know, like those episodes of SpongeBob that everyone hates. I usually don't care for stories where the concept is just torturing someone, but I think it works here due in part to the direction, but also because there's a premise behind said torture that really keeps you guessing. Michelle keeps flip-flopping between trying to convince the two that she's human and admitting to being an alien. When she does the latter, for most of the movie you think she's just playing along because of the situation she's in. And then when the truth is actually revealed, it still feels mind-blowing despite technically being hidden in plain sight for the entire movie. I dig movies that have you asking, are they gonna do it? Are they gonna do it? And then they fucking do it. Miraculously, this twist doesn't come across as out of left field and instead feels like something that was baked into the movie from the start. And even afterwards, you're still questioning if what the movie is telling you is true or not, and almost go back to thinking that Michelle isn't an alien and that she's just playing along again. It's like you can't trust anything this movie tells you, which really makes it stand out as something unique, even by Lanthimos standards. And of course, his excellent direction only helps elevate the deceptive nature of the film. So many scenes have this odd, eerie feel to them, and others are filled to the brim with tension, especially when you don't know exactly who you're supposed to be rooting for pre-twist. It's a super engaging roller coaster of emotions, complemented by stellar performances. Jesse Plemons is of course great, and Emma Stone really sells both sides of this character, and once again, keeps you guessing as to if you can trust her or not. Of course, we do get a definitive answer at the end, where it's revealed once and for all that she was indeed an alien, and this is the part of the movie I'm a bit more mixed on. I think a movie like this works best when it's left up to interpretation and leaves the audience asking questions, which is what made the first 2/3 so engaging. But confirming the existence of and getting to see this alien society takes me out of the movie just a bit. Not because it's unrealistic or anything, I think a concept like this works fine for a Lanthimos film, but it does take away the intrigue as to what Michelle as a character could actually be after. I think a perfect ending for this movie would be when she goes into the teleporter closet, the light switches, and then boom, roll credits. Answers the question of the movie while also leaving certain things to the audience's imagination. Instead, the actual ending of the movie comes across as more awkward than enjoyably weird. I won't spoil what it is, but it feels more like an excuse to have a bunch of funny shots rather than something that ties the movie's stories and themes up. I don't know, that's just the way I see it. Otherwise though, yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Maybe it goes on for a bit too long, and it obviously won't be for everyone, but it was consistently engaging, well acted, and supplied the offbeat weirdness that you would expect from this director despite how normal it may seem at first glance. And I definitely look forward to seeing the crazy shit this man will think up next.
Hello everybody, my name is Bagel Gabe, and today I interrupted this very nice and well thought out Emoji Talks video to talk about Bugonia. If you didn't already know, Bugonia is a film directed by Yorgos Lanthimos in which two conspiracy theorists, I don't know why I paused there, probably because I'm an alien, two conspiracy theorists kidnap a CEO because they think she's an alien with the intent on destroying planet Earth. I would also like to mention that this is technically an American remake of the 2003 South Korean film Save the Green Planet, which I have not seen, but if I did not mention that fact, people would comment because they want everybody to know that they know that fact. Because they live in a fantasy world where they think that people find their niche movie knowledge to be really impressive. And women find them attractive. Now that all that is out of the way, did I like Bugonia? Yes, I did. But genuinely, I do really like this movie. I've seen it twice now, and I really do think that a second viewing made me appreciate it even more. Because once you see it that first time and you see how things play out in the end, which I won't spoil, it's really interesting to be able to fully see the movie through that lens. Although at the same time, I will admit, even though it was my second viewing, the movie got weirdly close to having me second guess if I actually knew the ending or not. There are so many points in this film where it just makes perfect sense that Emma Stone's character Michelle would be a human, but then on the other hand, there are so many points in this film where it just makes perfect sense that her character would be an alien. And this is just a repeating cycle that happens throughout pretty much the entire thing, honestly. Sometimes within the same minute, which is pretty crazy. That is in part due to the screenplay, which is super well written, and if it wins Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars, I won't even complain. But what I think really sells it is Emma's performance. She had the task of making sure that both possibilities of her character would seem likely, and she really did turn in a performance that is truly perfectly balanced.
As all things should be.
And to close out my segment, I just want to say that if you're like me and you enjoy when a movie gives you multiple things to take away from it rather than just one central theme, I cannot recommend this movie enough. So, yep, that's all I got. Say Ferris, and on to whatever movie's next.
I miss my wife, Tails. I miss her a lot.
Train Dreams was a movie I knew next to nothing about before it got all this awards buzz. Much like Secret Agent, this was one I did not see coming as a potential Best Picture nominee. But I mean, hey, I guess I'll take anything over Avatar 3 and Wicked for Good. Forget I said that. Anywho, I'm happy to say that Train Dreams is a movie I ended up liking quite a bit. It's a pretty simple movie, focusing on the life of ordinary man Robert Grenier, watching the world evolve around him and having to deal with the loss of everything he knew along the way. It's nothing mind-blowing on paper, but the execution really makes it a sight to behold. The best thing about this movie is easily its cinematography and general look. So many gorgeous and distinct feeling shots that use perspective to wonderfully enhance the vibe of each scene. And something I haven't seen enough people bring up are the colors in this film. The lush greens of the forest, the warm orange of the candlelight, the glow of the sky at dusk and dawn. It makes it feel like such a magical setting that really sucks you back to 100 years ago. That is until you start following Robert and you see how harsh and sad this world can be. Which makes the moments where Robert is happy with his family worth that much more. Their connection is so sweet, and it's devastating when he loses them. Yet, life still goes on for him, and the world still keeps changing. That's another thing I love about this movie, the theme of the modernization of America and comparing the setting of the movie from the start to the end. You can tell a lot has changed, but it doesn't really hit you until the end in that scene where Rob goes to the city. That's because it's been happening in the background as we've followed his story, really highlighting his disconnection from the modern world as it grows to move past him. In that sense, Train Dreams weirdly reminds me of the Violet Evergarden movie, seeing an evolving world leave people and their purposes behind. Yet in spite of their minimal impact on the world that would later become obsolete, their lives still meant something through the connections they had with others. Unsurprisingly, Train Dreams kinda pales here in comparison to the greatest animated movie of all time, since none of the connections Robert forms outside of his family really last long enough to emotionally resonate. I understand the purpose of that, as it reflects life and its fleeting nature, and I'd rather have that than the film be overly long. But I still wanted a bit more from a few of these connections, especially with the Chinese guy at the start, or the old harmonica guy. I also think the narrator can be way too on the nose at times. I actually did like the addition at first, as it made it feel like we were reading a classic book, which fits the story of this movie perfectly. But as time goes on, the narrator does start to get excessive, and says things that really should be told visually. And I will say that in the grand scheme of this year's nominees, this does feel like one of the less remarkable ones. With a lot of other movies we're about to talk about, I see really inventive filmmaking bringing fresh-feeling innovative stories to life. With Train Dreams, I just see a really good Oscar nominee telling a pretty standard tale. Aside from the cinematography, nothing in particular really stands out about this movie, and I don't think it's going to be one of the more remembered nominees in a few years' time. But I don't think that means the movie is worth any less. I feel like the term standard Oscar movie is thrown around as an insult these days when it really doesn't need to be. I still find movies like this are well made and compelling, and it's clear there was a genuine passion behind it outside of wanting to get an Oscar. Sometimes telling a simple, heartfelt story isn't such a bad thing, and I think Train Dreams executes its story in a really beautiful way. Certainly not my favorite nominee, but a more than worthwhile pick nonetheless.
By all modern measurements of success, Robert Grenier's life was a waste. He died alone, unknown, with no family, his contributions to society completely invisible, and eventually made obsolete. He was no artist or poet. He never owned his own business or made a lot of money. He never even saw the ocean, and at the end, there was no one to bury him, and his body and his home were forgotten and reclaimed by nature. And yet, he lived. I've been seeing a lot of movies lately that praise the simplicity of living, the joy of existence, and appreciation for the little things. This is a message that I specifically need to hear, and one this movie conveys better than probably any other. Every aspect of this film, not just the plot, but the cinematography, the color, the earthiness of the world it depicts, all speak to that message. We live in a world that seems determined to drive us apart like never before, pointing out our differences instead of our similarities. And these movies that praise living for its own sake are sorely needed. There are definitely movies that convey this in a more positive and hopeful way, but maybe none that ring so true.
In the forest, every least thing's important. It's all threaded together, so you can't tell where one thing ends and another begins if you really look at it. The little insects you can't even see, they play a role as vital as the river. The dead tree is as important as the living one.
This is a man with nothing, and his life is as beautiful and important as anyone else's. And it's true for me, and it's true for you.
It's up to you to break generational trauma.
If I had to pick out the most tender and sincere nominee out of this year's batch, I think I would go with Sentimental Value. There's just an undeniable warmth and comfort to this movie that none of these other nominees really capture. That's not to discredit those other movies, I still think they're great, and obviously I like a couple of them more than Sentimental Value. But this one just has a real sense of authenticity to it. At least compared to Train Dreams and Hamnet, which were all really good, veer a smidge too much into that sappy Oscar bait territory. This one, on the other hand, isn't flashy or in your face at all. It just wants to tell a genuine feeling story about a broken family. And what a story it is. If anything, Sentimental Value kind of feels like the adult version of all the generational trauma movies Disney and Pixar have been making this decade. Not to discredit these movies, they do a great job in exploring this topic in a way that can be understood and followed by children. But this one is able to explore it in such a deep and thought-provoking way that feels a lot richer than what the limitations of a modern Disney movie can provide. And from so many different angles, too. Instead of honing in on the perspective of one character, we get to see the emotional struggles that being in this family has brought to its multiple members, making the central drama and theme resonate all the more. Nora and Agnes are such layered characters that you can tell have been broken and burned by the absence of their father, yet it's portrayed so subtly. There's no big argument scene in this movie where the characters let all their emotions out. Those are instead made clear through the impeccable writing and filmmaking. It doesn't show off because it doesn't need to, making these characters feel astoundingly sympathetic and human. Yet my favorite character in the film is easily Gustav. On the surface, yeah, he's a terrible parent who put his career before his daughter's. There's a very fine line between making this character hateable and sympathetic that they do a great job of walking on. When he asks Nora to take the role in his film, you can understand why she would be put off given how this is the man who put filmmaking before raising her, which he's seemingly doing again. But at the same time, you can tell he's trying to make a genuine effort and make up for the mistakes he made because he's a flawed human being. I love how there's this sense of awkwardness whenever he's in the room with his daughters. Like, you can tell that they aren't emotionally ready to forgive him and that he still has a lot to make up for. And in spite of that, they're still family and they're trying their best. Despite Gustav obviously doing a lot wrong, it doesn't feel like the movie is trying to frame him as a bad person, nor the sole reason the family is as broken as it is. Later in the film, we learn about Gustav's mother and what she went through, and gain a better understanding of why Gustav is the way he is, while still not excusing his actions. The generational trauma affecting this family truly feels, well, generational, making the efforts of Gustav and eventually Nora to break that cycle so satisfying to see. We even get to see this drama from the perspective of people outside of the family, like the American actress Gustav hires in place of Nora. I really like the way they handled her character, having Rachel gradually step back from the role when she realizes it wasn't made for her. And there's no dumbass jealousy arc between her and Nora either, which would have been so easy to implement. But this movie's drama runs deeper than that, and she's still a complex human being like the rest of the cast. Heck, we get to see this generational trauma from the perspective of the house. That's right, the fucking house. The opening of the film details how this family broke apart in the way that it did, and whenever we learn a new detail about this backstory, it always comes back to this house and the people within it. It's a symbol of the family's roots and trauma with all its cracks and imperfections. You know, maybe this movie has more in common with Encanto than I thought. I particularly love the detail of how at the end of the film, Gustav sells the home, which is then refurbished and modernized. But then when we see the house from the outside, we can still see that old broken home that's been at the core of this entire film. Sacrifices and changes had to be made, but at the end of the day, the foundation still stands, just like the family does. Honestly, the last 20 minutes of this movie are 10 out of 10 material. It's amazing to see Nora film that pivotal scene that has been set up throughout the film and have Gustav be there for her not just as a director, but a father. Just really beautiful stuff. Ultimately, this movie does suffer from a bit of Hamnet syndrome. Its highs are extraordinarily high, but a good portion of the movie is still fairly forgettable and bog standard, especially towards the middle. It's a very slow burn kind of movie that you really have to be in the right mood for. A few character relationships are also left a tad bit underdeveloped, like Nora's relationship with this one guy, or Gustav's with his cinematographer. It serves to make these characters feel more human, but doesn't feel like it adds too much to the theme of generational trauma. But as a whole, I think this is a much stronger package than Hamnet was because of that theme and how it's able to get you invested in the central characters. Topped off with stellar direction and performances from pretty much everyone, and you have yourself a damn good movie. Definitely glad I saw it, and it's well worth your time to check out. Though, a part of me did die inside when Gustav gets funding for his film he wants to be shown in theaters through Netflix. I guess bro really is dumb.
Let's get the obvious out of the way. This film has the best cast of the year, undoubtedly. Sentimental Value falls into the same category of naturalistic character work as Aftersun and Columbus, two of my favourite films, and excels in that raw humanity. It builds a gradual sense of emotional intimacy with its characters, while keeping them at a slight physical distance for most of the film, allowing for the emotional intensity to effortlessly reach an impactful and memorable height by the simple act of shrinking that distance towards the end, in tandem with the tone reaching its strongest sense of aimlessness. The sometimes meandering structure really helps to capture that sense of confusion. Like Columbus, it is, at its core, about an eternal conflict that eats away at its protagonist, and this kind of loose narrative capturing the mediocre highs and brutal lows of day-to-day life when in such a state is the best way to convey that very specific feeling. Not an easy thing to pull off either, since the film has to balance this weightlessness with a slow emotional progression in order to get Nora to the point where she is willing to be open. And considering how deep down the drain she is when the film starts, that's a tall order. The cold open of the film is very fascinating to me due to its disconnect from the rest. Choosing to open with a childhood essay from Nora that details thoughts from the perspectives of the family's house is something that does the exact opposite of set the tone here. For a film that is otherwise so deep in its characters' emotions and perspectives, it's a deeply counterintuitive choice to start in the perspective of a non-character. The thematic intention here is admittedly a little above my pay grade for me to be able to extract it, beyond the relatively obvious metaphor of the literal crack in the foundation of the house being analogous to the sisters' fractured connection with their father. However, I can say that as a viewing experience, being put far outside the realm of the characters' perspectives made it even more brutal when the next scene, in which Nora is introduced, is miles more anxiety-inducing and difficult to get through than any scene in Marty Supreme. It makes a hell of a statement about the messy nature of this character's life, but also immediately establishing her conflicting relationship with art and the artistic process, which ties closely into her also conflicting feelings about her father. Her resentment clouds her from seeing her deeply rooted desire to have that connection again. There's a real poignancy to the way the film uses the brutality of this setup, and the contrast it has with the much more mellow energy everything else has, to say so much about why the gift of artistic expression, which is unique to humanity, is so special. Despite the film that Gustav makes being inherently tied to one human language, a source of one of the conflicts with its creation, it also exists in a different kind of language, that of stories, of when direct words aren't enough. And really, isn't that what a lot of art is for? When the excesses of thoughts in our minds cannot be genuinely expressed directly, we find an alternative form of that expression which connects with people. Anyway, that's all from me. See ya.
Okay, so in the intro when I mentioned how pretentious film Twitter snobs are quick to shit on everything as soon as it becomes an Oscar player, the movie I was alluding to the most was Frankenstein. Apparently, certain people absolutely hate this movie. And like, sure, obviously I don't expect every single person who watched it to have liked it, but some of the takes I've seen regarding this movie are... yeah. Then again, it is common knowledge that you should disregard any opinion from someone whose letterbox rating curve looks like this. I saw people genuinely trying to make this the Oscar villain instead of F1. And while I'm not going to waste my energy sticking up for F1 despite liking it, I draw the line at Frankenstein. Because this is a fantastic movie. Del Toro really has a knack for taking classic stories everyone knows and meshing them perfectly with its distinct gothic aesthetic. And I like how in this one, he's not completely trying to reinvent Mary Shelley's original work, at least from what an outsider like me can tell. I hear this isn't the most faithful adaptation of the source material, which I would understand if that's the reason why you don't like this movie. But I still greatly admire the way Del Toro adapts this story. Unlike someone like Hosoda, who takes inspiration from other stories and reworks them with his own more modern ideas, which does work for him. Sometimes. Del Toro keeps these stories recognizable while giving them a fresh coat of paint with his directing. And when said directing is so on point, you have a damn good movie on your hands. Despite being told so many times before, the way he conveys all the core ideas of the story are so compelling. From Victor's madness to the monster's sympathy to the contrast between the two and where it leads them in their separate lives. I think everyone already knows the point of the Frankenstein story, and if you're looking for some massive subversion of it, you're not gonna get that here. So Del Toro made the best possible decision in making the minds of both the main characters clear from the start. Victor isn't portrayed as a good-willed guy who we're meant to sympathize with. He's cocky, full of himself, and has a slight sense of madness, even from the start of the movie. But similar to the main character from a certain other movie we haven't discussed yet, the movie isn't trying to justify how much of a monster he is, but rather form a compelling story around his terrible actions. Hey, sometimes assholes just make for compelling narratives, and this is definitely one of those times. With Victor's madness made clear almost immediately, we get to watch as he just gets more and more consumed by it during the creation of the creature. And seeing things unfold with the more sane characters and world around him makes it all the more engrossing. But the movie only gets better once the monster comes to life. For a brief moment, we get to see the humane side of Victor, only for that to shrivel up as he grows insane once again with the treatment of his creation, wanting to have it all destroyed as a reflection of his own insecurities about failing. And then when you think the story is over, it just begins, as we get to hear the creature's side of the story and what he went through after surviving his destruction. It's compelling to see him learn about the world in a way Victor could never teach, seeing life in beauty, but also death and despair. This is a movie that justifies its 2.5-hour runtime, as not only are the two sides of the story equally as compelling, but there's definitely value in displaying them separately and having the focus shift halfway through. I love how we really get to understand things from the perspectives of both characters, even if one of them we're not meant to sympathize with. And obviously, being a Del Toro movie, he knocks it out of the park in terms of the technical aspects. Some people say this movie is ugly, and I just do not understand why. The way this film uses color and light is so mesmerizing, from the whites of the snow to the greenish black of the basement to the light of the sun in certain shots. It all feels expertly thought out, and while I can understand the aesthetic not being for everyone, saying it looks or feels flat is just straight up lying. I mean, yeah, some of the CGI explosions are rough, but for every one of those, there's a stunning use of cinematography or a shot that manages to convey so much about a character or idea. I believe the right style can elevate any story, and Del Toro's definitely does the job here. Now, I'll admit, this movie isn't quite perfect. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of this whole framing device. It makes sense as it does give a reason for the story to be told by two separate characters, but it feels a bit awkward just having the creature come up in a fit of anger and then calmly tell his story for the remaining hour. I'm also a bit mixed on the ending, like I don't buy that the creature would forgive Victor in this scenario, nor does he really have a reason to. At least Victor dies, so he does get some sort of punishment, but it still feels a bit weird. The movie also may be a bit unsubtle. I think there were like 5 lines in this movie that amounted to, "Victor, you are the monster," and it's a bit overbearing. But I don't mind too much because, like I said before, this isn't trying to subvert the typical Frankenstein story, which everyone already knows the whole idea of. This is trying to take that story and combine it with Del Toro's creative aesthetic. And damn it, that is a match made in heaven. This is a great ass movie. I loved seeing it in theaters and I loved rewatching it for this video. I guess I can understand why it wouldn't work for everyone, but going as far as to say that this is a bad film is just dumb. GDT did an amazing job with this one, and while I wouldn't say it deserves to win this award, I can't argue against having it up in contention. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. The creature was hot, curse my bisexuality.
Hey everyone, I'm Isaac Carthy, and I'm here to talk about Frankenstein. And honestly, I thought it was really good. Guillermo del Toro is an extremely talented director, and his DNA is very much present here. It's a tragic and more human look at the creation with tremendous performances, especially from Jacob Elordi, and in-depth themes about abandonment and generational trauma. Not to mention, it looks fantastic. The cinematography and lighting are gorgeous, the production design and costume design perfectly capture the gothic European setting, the score is excellent, and the makeup on the creature is astounding. I know it's easy to dunk on Netflix for all the god-awful movies they've made recently, but clearly they can still make good stuff, and Frankenstein is clear proof of that. Check it out if you haven't already, and thanks to Emoji for featuring me in this video. It was fun getting to do this. Alright, back to whatever it is he has to say.
You lied to me! Of course I lied to you.
And now we've come to arguably the big 3 of this year's Oscar season. Nearly all the nominee ranking lists that I've seen have these in the top spots in a varying order, so I think it's clear that these are the fan favorites, and for damn good reason too. But with that said, I do have to put them in some order, and after careful consideration, I think Sinners is the slight weakest of this triad. Which hey, if a movie this good was only the 3rd best live action movie I saw last year, then it must have been a legendary year. Actually, fourth best. I think I liked The Naked Gun more, but whatever. Sinners is amazing. I didn't know what to expect going in, and this poster isn't really giving me anything to work with in terms of what the movie is gonna be about. So when I was met with a supernatural vampire horror film, I knew this was gonna be some good shit. Well, not really actually, since those elements don't start appearing until about halfway through. For the first half, it feels like you're watching a pretty standard period piece, which admittedly didn't really hook me the first time I saw this movie. It's a really damn good period piece, with amazing direction and performances. Also, fun fact, did you know that Smoke and Stack are played by the same guy? But nothing was really grabbing me enough to the point where I was understanding the overwhelming amount of praise this movie was receiving. The thing about Sinners, though, is that as the story moves forward, it just gets better and better. The vampire portion of the film is so damn cool, presenting the perfect meshing of old school lore with a modern horror flair. They don't rely on cheap scares and instead have the threat build and build and build, leading up to one hell of a climax. This second half really drew me in and convinced me that this was a damn good movie. Then I went back and watched the film for a second time, now knowing what I was in for, and even with the surprise factor gone, I found myself loving it even more, even before the vampire stuff comes in. And I think that comes down to this just being a really strong cast of characters. Everyone from Smoke and Stack to Sammy to Annie to Cornbread to Delta Slim to Mary to Grace and Bo. It's such a large cast that feels so diverse in terms of personalities, and the way they all play off each other is so fun. The dialogue in this film is perfection, so snappy and almost rhythmic from top to bottom. No interaction feels like a waste, and they feel so baked into the personalities of these characters to the point where they don't even really feel like characters. And that's another thing. Something about the way this movie is written just feels so real, despite, you know, being a vampire horror movie. With most of these other movies, I feel like I'm watching a group of actors who are delivering stellar performances for a motion picture. With Sinners, though, I feel like I'm watching a family. There's such a genuine sense of connection and community between the cast to the point where you get sucked into this juke joint like you're really there. It's loads of fun to be in this atmosphere, even after the vampires start showing up, because at that point it feels like you're along for the ride. A ride that is exciting, scary, and by the end, emotional. And like I already said, the direction and performances are just fantastic, really selling this world and these characters in a way that makes them so engaging to watch. Look at this one shot. Ryan Coogler is just flexing and he knows it. And the music, man. Do I even need to say anything? I am in love with this blues country meshing in both the score and the songs themselves. Nothing but bangers from start to finish. Yeah, I lied to you, it was great and all, but can we talk about Pale Pale Moon? The vocals, the mixing, the way it builds and builds. Dude! Scenes like this are what cinema was made for. As are scenes like meeting Mary at the train station, the opening in the church, the entire climax. I lied to you, obviously. It's a movie where everything comes together into a sublime experience. One that encapsulates themes of oppression, survival, and black culture and community in such a compelling way. If I had to scrape for anything to critique, I'd say that while really good, the first chunk of the movie where we're going around meeting all the characters still feels a bit too slow, even on rewatches. It's when the party starts when the film really picks up for me. And I do wish Sammy had some more screen time in development. I think maybe a scene or two more to really flesh him out could have helped strengthen the narrative and the ending especially. And oh yeah, the ending. It's great. I hope you didn't leave the theater before seeing it. Honestly, this being a mid-credits scene just feels like a last-minute executive decision to appeal to the Marvel crowd when it clearly should have just been the final scene of the movie. It doesn't really fit as this massive mid-credits stinger, like come on, you're not Neja 2. Regardless, I'd be lying if I said this movie as a whole is anything short of phenomenal. It's a rich, expertly directed, and sharply written film, but even beyond that, it's just a super fun time all around. With other movies on this list, I can respect them and acknowledge that they're very good, as I have been doing, but they're not necessarily films I see myself returning to anytime soon, nor ones I would recommend to an audience of people who aren't into the Oscars. Sinners, on the other hand, is a very rare modern movie that appeals to the cinema enthusiasts who look at things with a critical eye, as well as casual moviegoers who just want to be entertained for a few hours. Neither side overshadows the other, forming an experience that clearly managed to satisfy a lot of people. And it doesn't sacrifice anything to appeal to that bigger audience, because it doesn't need to. It knows there's a demographic who is going to get more out of this, and instead of hiding that, it embraces it and creates something exciting, engaging, and beautiful. And in turn, is able to hook people outside of the intended demographic who can appreciate what it's doing. You don't need to be black to get something out of Sinners, much like you don't need to be Chinese to get something out of Neja 2. It's because of how these movies proudly display their cultures that makes them so special and unique, on top of them presenting compelling narratives that can be followed and enjoyed by any audience member. And this isn't just a race thing, it can be applied to gender, sexuality, religion, and so on. As long as a movie tells a good story, it can appeal to everyone, and diversity doesn't need to be downplayed to accomplish that. So I guess what I'm really trying to to say here is that Pete Docter can fuck off. Anywho, I am so happy this movie did as well as it did, and I hope it paves the way for more modern blockbusters like it. It's earned all its praise and nominations for sure, and despite not being my personal favorite of the batch, it's an incredible movie that is going to live on as one of this decade's finest films. But Jesus Christ, the fans are annoying as hell. Oh, I'm so sorry your movie only got nominated for 926 awards instead of 927. You complain when it doesn't win an award, you complain when it does. What's gonna make you happy? If you're somehow unhappy with how Sinners is performing at the awards, then you would not survive a day as a little Amelie supporter. So please, shut up. Thank you.
She's a vampire.
Hey, I'm Icy Diamond, and I'm here to talk about the movie Sinners. There's a lot that can be discussed about this movie, but considering I'm short on time, I'll maybe just focus on one scene, that scene being I Lied to You. I remember seeing this movie in theaters, and when this scene came on, it was transcendent. It's the kind of scene that cinema was made for. The song starts off very slow and personal, but then it builds up, people around him start dancing more, and so far the song's pretty solid. But it becomes even better when we get new genres mixed in, because when that electric guitar hits, damn, it feels just right. The blending of other black and Asian genres is just done so masterfully. It not only flows together well, but the switch from one genre to another helps keep the scene really fresh and exciting. I also love the way this scene is shot. It eventually becomes one longer winding take across the entire party, to really emphasize the community that Sammy brings with his music. And then you have the ending, where the song reaches its height, and then we pan up to the roof burning, and we then see the vampires outside the party, smiling, perfectly setting up the next half of the movie, making this scene the perfect cutoff point for the more grounded part of the movie, and the horror part of it. If Sinners was a show, they could have ended the episode at this moment, and I would have been satisfied. That's how good it is. What a massively made scene and movie. However, despite my praises, I still think it's stupid that only this song and Golden are gonna be played at the Oscars. It feels very disrespectful to the other nominees there. Plus, I'm so fucking sick of hearing Golden never will make it stop.
Things happen one after another without a chance to catch your breath.
If you asked me to name my favorite movie-going experience in recent memory, I think a high contender would be on October 3rd, 2025. The day that I saw one battle after another a week after it came out. I missed the first 2 minutes because I got stuck in the popcorn line. I had to piss halfway through, but I managed to hold it in for the remaining half. And afterwards, I decided to make it a double feature, and I went to see the theatrical re-release of Perfect Blue. It was truly magical. Highly recommend. This is a movie that is best experienced in a theater because it is, for lack of a better term, cinema. It feels so far gone from the typical modern crowd pleaser, and it blows my mind that a major studio was willing to pour over $100 million into this. They were almost guaranteed to lose money with that gamble. This isn't a movie with massive blockbuster appeal, but it is a movie with a story to tell, and one that needs to be told. It feels uncomfortably in the moment, but in a way that it needs to be for the story to hook you to the extent that it does. It's a movie that feels so tense and stressful, but when you take a step back and look at it, not a lot really happens for most of the film. I mean, Act 2 doesn't even kick in until 55 minutes into the film, and it takes 33 minutes before we even get to the modern day where the bulk of the story takes place. You would think that would make the movie a chore to get through, but no. It all still feels necessary because the pacing here is perfect. This is an extremely rare 2-hour-plus film that miraculously doesn't feel like it has an ounce of fat anywhere. Even other movies on this list, you could probably trim them down a bit if you really wanted to. One Battle, on the other hand, just has this unbelievably seamless flow from the second it opens to the second the credits roll. Not a single minute feels wasted because there isn't a single minute that doesn't grab your attention. And not in a flashy, modern movie style way either. They do it through the power of raw, sincere filmmaking from someone who I can tell just from this movie alone is a true master of his craft. Paul Thomas Anderson perfectly directs every scene, making them all visually interesting and narratively compelling. Some movies feel like roller coasters, but this one is like taking the terrifying feeling you get at the top of a peak and then stretching it out for 2.5 hours. You're left on the edge of your seat for nearly the entire runtime because nowhere feels safe. There's always some looming threat to avoid, and the stakes feel unbelievably high. And the score is so damn good. And that's not just an in retrospect compliment. While you're watching this movie, it's impossible not to pick up on it and its sheer quality because of how much it adds to each and every scene. I can feel my heart racing whenever they use that damn piano piano, which they do a lot. I never thought they could make the wood block sound intimidating. How did they do that? Every aspect of this movie comes together and forms something immensely captivating in a way no other film released in 2025 is. And despite being one of the most uneasy feeling and gripping movies of the past decade, it manages to somehow be sweet too. While I certainly wouldn't say this film provides a lot of time for your soul to be at peace, you still feel immense emotional attachment to our main two characters throughout. Because at its core, this is a story about a father trying his best to save his daughter. It's like a gritty modern day Finding Nemo. What's not to love? As we're shown how harsh and cruel the world and the people that surround them are, you just want to see them reunite and make it out okay. It provides an immense sense of humanity in what basically feels like an apocalypse. And in addition to that, this movie is funny. The dialogue is crafted to perfection, and the actors' deliveries are golden. Anytime Bob is on the phone, this movie is a riot. And somehow, it's only the second funniest soon-to-be Best Picture winner of this decade. Nowhere is this movie's flawless balance of being comedic and strikingly down-to-earth evident than in the character of Steve Lockjaw. This guy is terrifying, and the lengths he goes through just so he can get what he wants makes him come across as an unstoppable menace. One whose ideals uncomfortably align with those of people in the real world. But at the same time, he also feels like such a goofy, desperate idiot. Just the fact that his name is Steve Lockjaw makes me laugh.
Steve!
And Sean Penn's impeccable performance could not fit him and his sheer patheticness any better. Yet it never feels like it subtracts away from his threatening presence and the amount of power he holds, making him the perfect villain for a movie of this type. I'm just gonna play this Shea Frillis clip because he describes it better than I ever could.
This film does an excellent job of taking the threat of white nationalism seriously, but also displaying white nationalists as the sheer losers that they are.
He's an excellent villain and a tremendous threat from the start all the way up to the climax. I will say that this is the one and only portion of the movie I'm not super big on. Not because I'm asking for some giant action movie blowout or anything, I just think Lockjaw and Tim were defeated a bit too easily. Especially Tim, who I wish had another scene building him up as a bigger threat. It works for what the movie is, and this road is obviously going to become an iconic movie set piece, but I don't know, it just felt a tad bit underwhelming to me. But dude, Willa standing down even though Bob can't recite the countersign and running down to hug her dad, oh man, guys. A rare moment of emotional peace and love in this utterly grueling yet relentlessly entertaining near masterpiece of a film. This feels like the type of film that movies were made for, which could be said about any film I place this high on the list, but this one especially feels like the piece of cinema that we all need right now for a multitude of reasons. It's a rare movie that feels like it makes the world a better place just through existing and presenting the story on the big screen. There's no doubt in my mind that it's going to be revered as a masterpiece for years to come. I can't wait to witness what Paul Thomas Anderson does next and see the rest of what he's done before, because One Battle After Another is a sensational movie. And without question, a more than worthy Best Picture nominee and hopefully Best Picture winner. But as for the question nobody has been asking, is it as epic as the Bob's Burgers movie?
No.
One Battle After Another was my personal favorite movie of 2025. I wasn't planning on seeing it for a while until it came out and got rave reviews across the board. So I saw it in theaters to avoid missing out, and yeah, it lived up to the hype. This is a movie that came out at the perfect time, displaying in full force the oppression marginalized communities face from the US government. You really feel the weight on everyone's shoulders as they struggle to get by in a world that wants to eradicate them. It gets its point across so well in just the first few minutes, pulling you in and keeping you on the edge of your seat for the rest of the film. And even beyond how relevant it is to current world events, this is still such a well-crafted, well-directed, tightly written, expertly shot, and thoroughly engaging experience. Bob is a compelling main character, and you really feel his desperation trying to save and make amends with his daughter. Said daughter, Willa, despite seeming like just another damsel in distress, gets plenty of development and time in the spotlight, and the villain, Colonel Lockjaw, is an absolute bastard you just love to hate. The actors are all great in their roles too, especially Sean Penn as Lockjaw. I can't believe it took me this long to see how brilliant of an actor he can be, especially since the only other movie I've seen him in was the Angry Birds movie. I've currently only seen 2 of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, yet I can still tell he is an absolutely goated director. One Battle After Another is the latest of his many masterpieces, one that needs to be seen to be believed.
In a year with so many great nominees, you'd think it would be hard to pick out a favorite. But for me, I knew what was going at the top from the moment I conceptualized this list. Marty Supreme is just too good. I'll admit up front that this is a purely subjective placement, and I think a fair case could be made for either One Battle After Another or Sinners, hence why I'm not going to protest if they take home all the gold. But the thing is, those two are just really amazing, near-perfect movies. Marty Supreme, on the other hand, is my type of movie. One that almost feels like it was specifically made to appeal to my senses and deliver everything I could ever want out of a feature film. It's exciting, it's funny, it's smart, it's engaging, dare I say it's exhilarating. It's the first time in ages that I was watching a movie that gave me the same vibes as Whiplash, my favorite film of all time. An unhinged mind-fucking experience that may not seem like anything too crazy for an outsider looking in, but takes you on one hell of a ride once you start watching. I mean, this movie opens with Timothée Chalamet's sperm over Forever Young, immediately indicating that you're in for a generational work of cinema, while hinting that this movie is unconventional and berserk in the best way possible. Sure, it seems like a normal ping-pong sports movie at first, and you could make a case that it is that, but there's so much going on around that to the point where it's kinda hard to give you a basic description of the plot. I mean, we have ping-pong alongside shootings, car chases, dog kidnappings, human kidnappings, Holocaust honey flashbacks, but it all works! And I think that's due to how much the movie hooks you on the main character. Mateo is one of the most epic characters in all of fiction. Dare I say he's more epic than Phileas. He's a cocky, self-absorbed asshole, sure, but like I said about Frankenstein, sometimes assholes just make for compelling stories. And this is the perfect example of that in motion. Due in no small part to Timothée Chalamet's excellent performance. He doesn't just nail this role, he is this role, providing Marty with an immense amount of charisma and personality. If they chose the wrong actor for this role, this movie would be an unbelievably miserable experience. But thanks to Timothy being such a charismatic actor, he makes Marty the kind of asshole you love to hate. It's wild how you find yourself rooting for someone so narcissistic and borderline psychotic, but it's hard not to when the movie is throwing so much shit at him and you. He bets so much on winning the ping pong tournament that when he loses, his life starts crumbling apart beneath him. And the bulk of the movie isn't about him building himself back up, but instead making things worse for himself. Every bridge he burns and every bad decision he makes just hooks you on him more and more. It's like a clusterfuck that you can't look away from because you know he's just continually digging the hole deeper for himself. Which sounds like it would be frustrating to watch, but it's so engaging because you want to see how he digs that hole. There are so many points in this movie where if Marty just quits and settles with what he's been given, he would have been fine. From when Rockwell offers him the Tokyo show, to when his uncle offers him to come back to his job, to when they win the money at the ping pong place, to when Kay offers him the necklace. But you know he's not gonna do that because that's not the type of character he is. He wants to be on top and won't settle for anything less, which is what ends up dragging him down throughout the film. Just like Whiplash, it's that desire to be great that drives him off the edge, which is so compelling to watch. And that's just the character himself. What about all the shit around him? There is never a dull moment in this film because there's so much going on, yet it's all ingeniously connected back to Marty and him fucking shit up. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine, where each wild event is set off by another in a way you would never see coming. My favorite example is towards the middle of the film, when Marty gets a hotel room and the manager tells him not to use the shower. The first time you watch this movie, you think that's just a throwaway line that will have no impact on the story. But then, in the epicest scene of all time, Marty takes a bath, breaks through the floor, and lands on an old man's arm, then proceeds to steal his dog and lose it. And you think it stops there? No. Later, in an attempt to get reward money, he goes out to find the dog, which has now been taken in by a violent man with a gun who tries to kill him. Then later, the old guy from before kidnaps Marty's girlfriend and forces him to take him to where the dog is, and then he gets killed, and it's like, dude! This movie is so madcap in the best way possible. With the obvious exception of Everything Everywhere All at Once, I have never seen an Academy Award for Best Picture nominee with a level of insanity quite like this. It's not at all what you expect when you think of a typical Best Picture nominee, but that's what makes it all the more admirable to me. It's not embracing what the Oscars want or what a focus group wants, it's embracing the power and limitless storytelling potential of cinema. And that is only scratching the surface of how fantastic this movie is. The entire supporting cast is spot on, especially Odessa Azion as Rachel. There's so many cool shots and editing choices. The score is filled to the brim with top-tier compositions that should have gotten it a nomination. Each scene is well directed and manages to be just as, if not more engaging than the one that came before. And it all leads up to a sensational climax where Marty, the big fat loser, finally fucking wins. And seeing him go back home to Rachel, at last labeling himself as the father rather than a friend, and seeing his baby and tearing up as he lets go of his narcissism and finally settles down with what he has. Dude, oh my god. Marty Supreme isn't some emotional tour de force that will make you cry rivers for days. It's not a supernatural genre-bending experience. It's not a film that speaks volumes about our modern society and will be remembered as a historic masterpiece. But damn it, it's Marty fucking Supreme. While it may not be any of those things I mentioned, it expertly combines stellar filmmaking, compelling drama, and god-tier performances to make its own type of masterpiece. I honestly can't remember the last time I saw a live-action movie that floored me quite like this one. And considering what I just said about Sinners and One Battle After Another, two movies that are inevitably going to go down as modern classics and triumphs of filmmaking, that is some high praise right there. As I alluded to, Marty Supreme is this decade's Whiplash, an unforgettable, gripping, anxiety-inducing roller coaster of emotions that encompasses rich, sharp, cinematic storytelling at its finest. One of my new favorite films of the decade, and easily my pick for the best of the 2026 Best Picture nominees. And that's my ranking. 9 movies that range from pretty good to some of the finest examples of what modern cinema can offer at its peak. And Secret Agent was in there too, I suppose. Even though I mainly want animation to be the focus of this channel, I had a great time going through and getting to share my thoughts on these excellent movies. And much like how you shouldn't limit yourself to only watching mainstream animated movies and should see what the rest of the world does with the medium, don't be scared to venture out into live action cinema as well and see what it has to offer. Which is especially important given how not great the animation lineup of 2025 was. And I think a lot of these movies are a great gateway into richer, more mature cinema, even the ones I didn't like as much. From the tense thrill of One Battle After Another, to the spooky yet fun atmosphere of Sinners, to the unhinged exhilaration that is Marty Supreme, I think there's a film here for everyone. Unfortunately, there's no horrific abomination that you need to avoid at all costs. Cinema is such a wondrous art form, and as flawed as the Oscars are in practice, if they can bring attention to inventive, diverse, and expertly crafted movies such as these, I think they definitely have their value. So go check these films out, and I hope this video provided a fresh perspective on some of them. In a community populated by unbearable snobs, genuine, unbiased looks at these films from someone who isn't one of those are important to have. At least, I hope I'm not seen as one of them. I probably am to someone. Like Illumination fans who get mad when I say that there are indeed better, more worthwhile movies than Minions: The Rise of Gru, such as all 10 of the movies I just talked about. But don't worry, I know a way to appease those fans and make this entire video worthwhile to them. Give me a sec. There, are you happy? It's the song you like that makes the entire video good now. Is my video worth $972 million by now? By your logic, it is. I'm out. I'm going. Bye.